Good evening. For those of you who think that I'm recording in the middle of the night, I want to point out that it's 7:11 p.m. So not quite the middle of the night. I think I should be expected to be awake at this time of the evening. So cool your jets. I I never cease to be amazed at the number of people who buy into Freeman's bullshit. This guy right here on the screen is a sovereign citizen. He thinks that you have to contract away your rights, and he thinks that the rights that he has are God given and all sorts of other bullshit. Basically, what this comes down to is there's two real issues, as far as I can tell. Number one is there is an ordinance on RVs. This is the RV ordinance right here. This is for Bonner County, Idaho. Occupancy of a recreational vehicle on a lot or parcel shall not exceed 120 days in any consecutive 12-month period, not including recreational vehicle parks. Recreational vehicle occupancy is limited to one such vehicle per lot or parcel. Recreational vehicles. You can see that you could park them in any of these except for the industrial area. Any of the lots, any of the zoned areas. So, first of all, Freeman takes great umbrage that, people are really upset about where a person lays his head to sleep at night. Oh my God, the humanity, it's barbaric, and anybody who tries to enforce this is a criminal. Unfortunately, the state of Idaho disagrees. Each governing board, that would be the county board, zoning board, shall, by ordinance adopted, amended, or repealed in accordance with the notice and hearing procedures provided under Section 67-6509 of the Idaho Code, establish within its jurisdiction one or more zones or zoning districts where appropriate. The zoning district shall be in accordance with the policy set forth in the adoptive comprehensive plan. Within a zoning district, the governing board shall, where appropriate, establish standards to regulate and restrict the height, number of stories, size, construction, reconstruction, alteration, repair, or use of buildings and structures, percentage of lot occupancy, size of courts, yards, and open spaces, density of population, and the location and use of buildings and structures. All standards shall be uniform for each class or kind of building throughout each district, but the standards in one district may differ from those in another district. So they go into a lot of detail about all the different zoning classifications and things. But it does appear that the state of Idaho, at least in their statutes, it does seem that they think that the various counties and cities and Idaho itself should have the right to determine various things about what you build, where you build it, and how you build it, and what kind of use you put the land to. But what does the Idaho Constitution say? This is Article 12, Section 2 of the Constitution of the State of Idaho. Local police regulations authorized. Now, this doesn't mean criminal necessarily. This means just policing, like administering, enforcing, etc. Any county or incorporated city or town may make and enforce, within its limits, all such local police, sanitary, and other regulations as are not in conflict with its charter or with the general laws. Sounds like it's constitutional, at least according to the state of Idaho's constitution. But what does the U.S. Constitution have to say? Because it's a taking, right? You're taking something away from the owner of that property. You're taking away his ability to use that property to sleep in an RV for more than 120 days, or to have multiple RVs with multiple people sleeping in it. Well, this is the Village of Euclid v. Ambler Realty. Ambler Realty Company owned a large section of land, and the Village of Euclid, in passing its zoning ordinances, essentially zoned this large section of land into 3 zones. And it did it with a plan. I mean, it wasn't just arbitrary. It was carving up certain areas for residential, and those residential areas included portions of this very large lot. And some were for mixed commercial and residential. And then a small sliver of it was for industrial or commercial. And, that industrial commercial area had, I think, rail access or something like that. But anyway, it wasn't arbitrary and it wasn't unreasonable on its face. And so the U.S., and this is still good case law. I mean, they are still citing Euclid v. Ambler today. I mean, this is the case that is still a go-to case. If all these reasons, so the court does actually go into, the exclusion of business establishments from residence districts might enable the municipal government to give better police protection, blah, blah, blah. Aside from considerations of economic administration, it's a matter of police and fire protection, street paving, etc. Any business establishment is likely to be a genuine nuisance in a neighborhood of residents, blah, 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 blah. So they talk about all these different things, right? How even apartment houses in a residential area might, which in a different environment would not be entirely unobjectionable, but highly desirable, right? Not only entirely unobjectionable, but highly desirable, come very near to being nuisances if they're placed in a single family residence kind of area. If these reasons, thus summarized, do not demonstrate the wisdom or sound policy in all respects of those restrictions, which we have indicated as pertinent to the inquiry, at least the reasons are sufficiently cogent to preclude us from saying, as it must be said, before the ordinance can be declared unconstitutional, that such provisions are clearly arbitrary and unreasonable, having no substantial relation to the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare. Now, there's 2 things that they kind of bring up in here. They bring up nuisances. And just so you know, even though this is a 1926 case, nuisance, private nuisance, public nuisance, those are common law torts. Those have been around since before the United States was the United States. And since Boy Wonder here, this bearded genius, thinks that his rights, thinks it's been changing, he just doesn't understand. You could always sue as an individual if somebody is using a neighboring property in a way that affects your right to quiet enjoyment. You do have a right on your property to quiet enjoyment. Now, like every other right, it's not, uninfringible. If your neighbor has a baby and it's summertime and their windows are open and your windows are open and the baby starts crying, it might bug the crap out of you. But you got to expect that in a residential neighborhood. That's not an unreasonable infringement on your right to quiet enjoyment. However, if your neighbor on their property starts up a wood chipper at midnight, that is going to disturb your quiet enjoyment. It's going to It's going to change the way that you can enjoy your home. And so you would have a right under the common law. Most states still recognize this particular tort to sue for that private nuisance. Or if your neighbor has a fetish for death metal and really likes to burn tires while he listens to loud death metal, that would be something that you'd be able to sue over. There's public nuisance is a little bit different, and public nuisance is kind of where a lot of these ordinances grew out of. They're basically preventative ordinances that would prevent you from doing something, and you can see this in later case law where beyond Euclid. Oh Jesus, I forget what it was. It was South Carolina. It was a South Carolina case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court, where the taking was 100%. The guy owned 2 lots on the coast, and he had intended to build on them in the future. And South Carolina essentially passed an ordinance that said you could no longer build on the shoreline to preserve the beauty of the shoreline. And I think Scalia read the decision. I can't remember why. I can't remember the name of it. But in his decision, he said basically things like, somebody who owns the right, who owns the lake bed, can't claim a loss, can't claim that the government's infringing on his rights for not allowing him a permit to raise the lake bed, which would then flood the neighboring properties. Or similarly, a nuclear plant, a private nuclear power plant, if it's built over a fault line and it becomes subsequently known that it's built over a fault line, and so that zoning is taken away, it's no longer allowed to be a nuclear power plant, even though it's depriving them of their ability to generate money and it's taking away their economic interest in that land, it's not a taking because it's a public nuisance. You can't have a nuclear reactor built over a earthquake fault line. You also see it in like factories. If someone wants to build a factory too close to houses, if they build a factory too close to houses, let's just say they do it. Let's just say there's no zoning ordinances in place. They build a factory too close to the houses, and the smoke and the lights from the factory and the increased traffic from the factory negatively affects the right to quiet enjoyment, and it lowers the property values of the residents who owned homes near it. They would have a right at common law. Well, the city, I guess, or the county would have a right to sue for public nuisance. They may also, the residents may also have their own suit for private nuisance. That might vary depending on locality. But it's a long enshrined tort. And so basically what zoning laws do is they kind of prevent the tort from happening. They're intended to step in front of it and prevent the situation from coming up, because it's better to stop it ahead of time. If you're going to build a factory, it's better to know that you're building a factory in an area that's zoned for factories, instead of building a factory in an area and hoping you're far enough away from the residential area and hoping that the trucks going to and from your factory don't impact that residential area. So it just clarifies everything. It clarifies the situation. It prevents unnecessary lawsuits. It prevents the loss, because if you build that factory and all of a sudden you got to shut it down because you're too close to the residents, then you've lost a ton of money, right? So it's better for everybody concerned to have those ordinances in place, those zoning ordinances in place to prevent this kind of thing in the long run. And similarly, it's a protection to individuals. Building codes, the second part of this is on building permits and building codes. After Freeman chastises people for having gone in and participated in this statutorily required meeting before they change ordinances to allow the community to be heard, he praises this guy for going in and basically disrupting another one of these meetings. I mean, this guy's the tyrant, right? I mean, doesn't he just look like a tyrant? And yes, this guy does get paid to do a job. His job, unlike what Freeman and Bearded Wonder here think, this guy's job does not entail just sitting at town council meetings or county council meetings. He does other things. But this particular beef is because this Bearded Wonder here built a building. He built a structure on his property, and he didn't get a permit for it. And the permit, that's just a way for the city to make money. Well, I mean, the city may profit from it, but the point of the permit is to have qualified engineers, qualified people look over the permit to make sure that it is going to be safely constructed, or to look over the plans to make sure that things are going to be safe, that there are the proper clearances between various things, like the chimney is created correctly so that it will actually exhaust out into the sky instead of purging smoke into the house. That it's not going to catch the roof on fire. That the windows are big enough for people to get out of safely if there is a fire. That the water heater is going to be strapped down in case there's an earthquake. That the stove is properly plumbed with gas or whatever, so that it's not going to create a hazard. I mean, just the electrical outlets just make sure the electrical outlets are grounded so there's no risk of fire. It is for safety. And you might say, well, it's my property. I should be allowed to cook myself if I want to. Well, number one, it may not only affect you, because we do live in a society which James thinks is barbaric, but which sane people don't think is barbaric, where if your house catches on fire, the government is going to start fire trucks rolling, an ambulance rolling to help you to put out the fire. Because not only does it help you, but it prevents the fire from spreading to your neighbors. And it further protects you because if you go to buy a piece of property that has a structure on it, if that structure has permits, if everything is permitted, you have a reasonable chance of it being constructed correctly. Now, I'm not saying it's foolproof, but it is better than having it be unpermitted. There was a case that went through the law office that I work for. I wasn't involved in it, but it was a jaw dropper for me anyway. I remember it distinctly. Our clients purchased a piece of property in Placer County that had a home built on it, and the seller required a cash sale. The reasoning behind it was, we bought this home for cash. They had a real good pitch. We bought the home for cash. We think that these exchanges should be between the person to person, and we don't want to pay some stupid real estate broker a big chunk of money. We want to handle this, face to face, etc. And they wanted cash, and it sounded good. You're not going to give the broker $10,000 or whatever. because brokers get like, between the two brokers, they'll get like 6%. So out of a, let's say it's a $500,000 property. I don't remember how much this particular property sold for, but let's say it's a $500,000 property. If it sells for $500,000, the real estate agents, both sides, will get like 3%. So that's 6% total, and that's like $30,000. So they'd each get $15,000. And oh well, I could sell it for, I could spend less, says the buyer, and get, just cut out the real estate agent. Well, it was a great sales pitch. Our client bought the property, and then he noticed that there were a lot of cracks in the walls that appeared. I don't remember how long, but it appeared after he purchased it. And he got a contractor out there to take a look at it, and this house did not have a foundation. I don't even know how you could build a house without a foundation, but this house had no foundation. It was just a floor and walls that were laid on bare ground. And so things shift and settle, and cracks appear. It's absolutely amazing. The problem with this is the seller had, it wasn't a terrible contract. It did indemnify the seller against latent defects, and it did require the purchaser to inspect for defects and have the home inspected prior. And if they waived that home inspection, then it was on them. But the seller was gone out of the state of California, and to the best of my knowledge, we've never located him. So, a 500, I'm guessing, I don't know how much it was, but it was an expensive mistake, because obviously that house is going to have to be entirely torn down and a new house built literally from the foundation up, because there was no foundation. So it's a protection. It is a protection for subsequent purchasers. If you're going to go purchase a house and it has building permits, you have a reasonable chance that it's a well-built house. So in a society, we do need some protections from people who are going to take advantage of us. And just because this guy thinks he's built a piece of, or a structure correctly, and he feels comfortable in it, doesn't mean that it isn't necessarily going to cost society in the long run. And I know I've beat this one up, but I've tried not to be too nitpicky on it, because there are some things I could really nitpick. But the law is clear. These are the villains right here. Look at them, just terrible guys. These guys are elected, by the way. And so if you don't like what they are doing, your recourse is to vote for different commissioners. They're elected. Vote new guys into office if you think they're not doing a good job. But it is pretty clear that the statute, or the code is there. The code is authorized by statute. The statute is authorized by the Idaho Constitution, and the United States Constitution has no issue with it. So thank you for watching, and have a great day.